We have quite the challenge today. We want to come up with gameplay strategies that even these drinky birds could do. Now, let me quickly click off that so that way I don't get a copyright strike. This is a sim for warrior playing dual wield with single-minded fury and consumed by rage. This gameplay in here for the rotation is set as optimal, but it's kind of hard to actually play that good in reality because although consumed by rage technically lasts 12 seconds, you get 12 swings off before that happens, nearly always. And so it's very easy to deplete this buff. You need to constantly be going above and below 80 rage, and it turns out that going below is the hard part for most people. Let's simulate this if you're playing absolutely perfectly, which is kind of a hassle. Well, you'd have a 98% uptime on consumed by rage. I wonder how much damage would we lose if we took the traditional rotation and we eliminated heroic strike from it, because this is where all the decision making comes in, and it is the entire pain point we want to solve. But simply taking it out of the rotation will make you lose 90 DPS. However, it's not for the reasons you're probably thinking. No. It's not simply the damage from heroic strike. The largest difference is actually losing 63% uptime on consumed by rage. Isn't that nuts? You get about 1/3 of the regular uptime if you were to have no heroic strike, simply because it would be so hard to ever go under 80 rage and reproc it. So that's the real thing that we want to tackle here to be able to have a drinky bird style rotation, one that anybody could do perfectly. This is the strategy I'm thinking to alleviate this issue. We're going to want to make a macro that has a cast sequence in it. It will be hamstring, thunderclap, heroic strike. Now, the thunderclap and the heroic strike actually will occur at the same time, and together they'll cost 32 rage. But this sim doesn't let us simulate that. So instead, what I did was I went and downloaded the code off GitHub, and then I needed to put a little adjustment in. I made it so that way Sunder Armor would have the same cost as the last part of this macro. That'd be the thunderclap plus the heroic strike. And then I also set it so that way it's able to crit. So this way, the sim's a little more accurate, but there are still things missing. You see, although we're paying for that heroic strike, we're not actually receiving the value from it in any other way. But paying gives a lot of value all on its own, as you can see here. Now, this is 280 DPS, as opposed to the other strategy before where you did no heroic strikes and you'd have 250. But of course, this isn't sufficient all on its own, although it has resolved the consumed by rage problem nearly entirely. But you'll see down here, look how there's no glancing blows on the yellow hits and how the mischance is much lower. And when you use heroic strike some instead of not at all, you actually get those benefits on your main hand swings too. So let's see what the damage breakdown looks like if we go back to the original settings that are optimal. You'll notice that they get 21 main hand swings off and 25 heroic strikes. So it's about a 50-50 balance. And when you do a heroic strike, you don't have to worry about the dual wield miss penalty. And you also don't have to worry about glancing blows. So there's a lot of enhancement to your DPS. Not to mention your offhand actually does more damage too while you're heroic striking. We're not conferring any of these advantages right now because although we're paying for heroic strike, we're not actually casting it in this simulator. As you can see, there are no heroic strikes actually registered. And so we would expect to do more than this much damage if we did start using this macro. And you might be wondering, well, why would you think that we'd have a certain amount of heroic strikes? Because that's what we'd actually need for this to be true. And this is my argument. Looking at the cast sequence macro, you can see that every 4.5 seconds, we're going to queue up a heroic strike. Now, let's do a thought experiment. You have a 3-speed weapon, this one perhaps. That means in 4.5 seconds, you'll have 1.5 swings. Then your next swing will become a heroic strike. So it's similar to 1 in 2.5 or 1 in 3 swings will be a heroic strike. And when you're playing optimally, it'll be about half. So I believe we're going to end up closing somewhere around 60 to 70% of this gap because we're going to be doing a similar amount of heroic strikes. We're only going to be doing a little bit less than playing optimally if we use this strategy. So I believe it's very safe to say that you'd get at least 300 DPS, but you'd only have to hit this one button, and you'll probably do a better job doing that than trying to stare at your rage the entire raid.